relation to the Tigray crisis, the pressure exerted by the West on the government of Ethiopia continues unabated. Recently, the US announced to prevent issuance of visas for any current or former Ethiopian or Eritrean government officials, members of the security forces, or individuals including Amhara regional and irregular forces and members of the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the TPLF, responsible for or complicit in undermining the resolution of the crisis. Responding to the United States unilateral action, the government of Ethiopia stated that the attempt by the US administration to meddle in its internal affairs is not only inappropriate, but also completely unacceptable. The relationship between the West and the Ethiopian government at present has sunk to the lowest level. Why? Does the diplomacy wrangling between the West, especially the US and Ethiopia, emanate from humanitarian reason, or could there be some ulterior motive to it? My guest today is Professor Messay Kebede of Dayton University. Professor Messay is a distinguished scholar who has written a number of books, academic journals, and articles on Ethiopian affairs. Some of his publications include Radicalism and Cultural Dislocation in Ethiopia, 1960 to 1974, African Quest for a Philosophy of Decolonization and Survival and Modernization, Ethiopia Present, a Philosophical Discourse. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
I'm glad to have you here. Professor, let me start my question with this latest diplomatic wranglings between Ethiopia and the West, especially the United States. How do you see that? What's really the reason why the West want to increase their pressure on the government of Ethiopia?
Okay. Before analyzing or trying to analyze the reasons, I would like to emphasize one thing, namely that the Western reaction, or I should say the Western criticism, sanctions against Ethiopia, really are defined by something that I will call surprised. Everybody's surprised. We don't really understand why, given the situation and given the background of Ethiopian history, how the West could take such a position. Now, to go back, let's say, to the conflict, we know that since Prime Minister Abiy came to power, the TPLF has been unwilling to accept the federal government. And it has expressed this in various ways. It has acted also unlawfully. For example, I could cite the example of the refusal to postpone the election due to the pandemic, even though the federal government has taken a stand, decided against the danger of holding this election at that time. So we can cite also the fact that in many ways, Tigray was acting almost as an independent country since Abiy came to power, which was, let's say, an open defiance, to the very structure, let's say, of the Ethiopian political system. Now, the last straw, of course, was the sudden attack of the TPLF militia forces on Ethiopian national forces stationed in Tigray. This was therefore a treacherous attack. And what was expected then from the federal government was to respond in such a way as to restore, let's say, the federal order. Because, let's say, the TPLF was acting, let's say, or the state in the region of Tigray was acting as a rogue state totally outside the control of the US. And not only that, of course, the fact also that it attacked the national forces there was therefore clearly a sign of complete defiance, and that the Ethiopian government could not tolerate any sensible, let's say, policy would, let's say, require that order be restored. And accordingly, the Ethiopian government launched a counterattack that it called law enforcement operation, which was a proper designation, because they say it was about restoring the federal order in Tigray. Now, this was therefore, in light of all these events, in light of the open defiance of the TPLF state in Tigray, the Ethiopian government therefore took the proper action. And because of this, people and observers and the Ethiopian government, all of them were expecting some support from Western government, because the TPLF was really acting as a terrorist organization, and that the Ethiopian government was on its right to defend itself, to protect itself against, let's say, this kind of attack. So this was the other surprise. We know what was the result of the counter-offensive. It led to the complete and quick military defeat of the TPLF. I say military only because it is not yet a political defeat. So in this situation where Ethiopians were expecting some kind of support from the Western government, the reaction of the West became all the more surprising as, they say, the aggressor, that is the TPLF, was viewed as a victim. Everything was upside down. Not only that, Ethiopian and Eritrean forces were accused of a host of human rights violation, like rape, indiscriminate killings, and looting. Even though they say nobody verified whether these accusations did happen in the extent they were described. But this is also another another surprising thing, that nobody really goes and check the facts as they are, but simply everybody, and especially Western government, seem to rely on hearsay by, let's say, various media sources, and that this was really also another surprising thing. Now,
so what do you think is the reason behind this? I mean, as you said,
I'm coming to it. The other thing also was for Ethiopians, therefore, the accusation of human rights violation, of grave or serious human rights violation, was also another surprise, because we remember that during the 27 years of the horrible rule of the TPLF over Ethiopia, the West, let's say, did not show the same eagerness to denounce human rights violations. Even I remember President Obama, I think it was in 2015, declaring the TPLF government, or saying that the TPLF government was a democratically elected government, even though all the seats in the parliaments were taken by TPLF and its supporters. So, all this indicate that there was, on the part of Western government, there was no any fair assessment of the situation, and let's say the policy adopted by the West was actually favoring clearly the TPLF interpretation of the war and the conflict in Ethiopia. Now, your question is, what could explain this policy? It's more than a policy. We could even call it hostility, open hostility of the Western government toward Ethiopia. Now, the one reason that we can eliminate then is the accusation of, let's say, severe human rights violations. That cannot be the reason. On the contrary, this accusation appears as a...
Why? Is there human rights?
Because when the same thing happened...
Yeah, people
go
die. There is some kind of hunger in Tigray, and a lot of people are dying because of the war, and so women are raped, and as they say. So the Ethiopian government even doesn't deny that there is some kind of human rights violation in the region. So are you saying that there is no human rights violations there, or are you just saying that it is not as much as what the media report?
No, I'm saying it is just a position that more or less a reason used to justify criticism, interventions, and let's say the sanctions. Because, I mean, the whole issue is here. If Western government were serious, were really concerned about the violation of human rights, then we should actually, they should have, let's say, taken the same position or the same stand vis-a-vis the TPLF government, but they didn't. So it's not the violation of human rights that triggered Western reaction. That's why I said, let's say it is, let's say, close to hypocrisy than anything else. And hypocrisy means in this case, it is, let's say, something that you express in order to justify other things, that is, like the sanctions and maybe intervention. So I don't, let's say, I can't buy this argument that even, I mean, on the other hand, I mean, we must not forget that when you start a war, then of course there will be some form of humanitarian crisis. I mean, you cannot avoid this in any way.
Elsewhere, yeah, Professor. I think elsewhere you've written some kind of comment which says this campaign of the West against Ethiopia has little to do with the Western ignorance about the facts on the ground or a failure of the Ethiopian government to properly defend its rights. It is a political stand against a defiant Ethiopia. No arguments of any kind will alter the Western position, it says. What do you mean by this defiant Ethiopia, or a political stand against a defiant Ethiopia? Can you elaborate that?
Yeah. But first also, let me consider first the reason that most observers advance in order to explain the Western position. They say it has to do with geopolitical concern. Now, we need to explain what we mean by here geopolitical concern. The one thing is that there is a serious danger in the sense that the war can spread in the Horn of Africa, in the entire Horn of Africa, so that it can create an instability, political instability that is not acceptable for Western interest, for peace and for peace and stability. Now, here, what they are saying is that, I think, what they are saying is that one cannot assume that the Ethiopian government will prevail in this conflict. Because as it stands now, the Ethiopian government is fighting on various fronts. There is, of course, the war in Tigray, but also there is a tension with Sudan and Egypt over the Nile Dam. And also there are ethnic clashes inside Ethiopia in various ways, with many displacement. So that the Ethiopian government is in a weak position. One cannot say that it will prevail. If this war goes on, if it war continues, then the consequence would be that complete chaos and instability will be, let's say, the defining feature of Ethiopia very soon. So they say we have to stop that. And the only way that we can stop that is by imposing some form of negotiation with the parties involved, negotiation therefore with internal oppositions, negotiation with Sudan and Egypt to settle the Nile dispute, and also let's say some form, let's say, of mediation that would be acceptable to all parties. Now, the view of the West is that only Western government can really pressure all the parties concerned to come to some kind of agreement. African countries or any other country cannot do it, because Western government can pressure Egypt, they can pressure Sudan, and they can pressure also, let's say, the TPLF to come to some kind of agreement. We can't do it. We can bring peace in Ethiopia. Now, the only obstacle to this is the defined position of Abiy's government. Abiy refuses to negotiate with the internal opposition. He has taken a stand over the Nile that seems to be, that they would describe as inflexible. Is not ready to make any concession on some matter that, let's say, that is dear to Egyptians and Sudan. So the whole Horn of Africa is in danger. We have the solution. We can implement that solution, but here, the obstacle, the main obstacle, is Abiy. He has rejected the dictate or the proposals, let's say, of the West, pursuing therefore his own line of thinking, and not taking into consideration the interest, let's say, of the entire region. And also, at the same time, let us not forget that there is the intervention of Eritrea here, Eritrean forces, that also complicates further the issue. One last thing I would mention is, regarding, let's say, this geopolitical concern, is, let's say, that this position, this defined position of Ethiopia, does not really agree with the overall interest of the West, which is basically the containment of China, especially the reduction of the influence of China on Africa. They say we cannot rely on Abiy government or Abiy himself to become, let's say, an ally in the fight against China because of his attitude. He is not, let's say, taking Western prescription seriously. He just is following his own mind, and this is not, he's not a good player in this pursuit, let's say, of the preservation of the global hegemony of the West.
Sorry, Professor. What is the West's interest on Ethiopia really right now? Because it seems that leaders of the Western countries in Europe and in America, Ethiopia's issues, especially the Tigray issues, high on their agenda. But we don't know exactly what they want, because they can pursue their interest with Abiy Ahmed's government than aligning with a certain riffraff of a certain group of belligerents, of insurgents, whose destiny is not yet determined because they are now in the bush, and we don't know whether they come back and serve their interest. But is it not better for the West to allow or to work with Abiy Ahmed than the TPLF, whose destiny is not yet known?
Well, the issue precisely is that Abiy does not seem to, as I said, play the game of these global forces. He is seeing things from the viewpoint of the interest of Ethiopia. So when we say, for example, when it comes to the Nile, that we want to mediate this conflict, the fact that Abiy refuses means therefore that they will be excluded, absolutely, from the discussion. And hence this huge thing that is, which is this dam, which gives therefore some power to Ethiopia now, is, let's say, exclude the West, and this is not acceptable for them, because it is questioning the global order as they see it, the global order as the Western power sees it. And that if you question that, then you are not a proper ally, you are not a partner to this game, and therefore they will have to remove you in one form or another.
Do you think they take that position? Do they go far to the extent of removing him from power, or is it something to urge him to come to the table, for instance, to negotiate with the TPLF, or as you said, with Egyptian in Sudan?
Yeah. I mean,
do they go to the toppling him down, or?
Yeah. I mean, all they do, because you see, the rational attitude in this case, seeing, let's say, the dangerous situation that is developing in Ethiopia, seeing all the ethnic clashes, what they would say, and you expect that this is how they would think rationally, that we have to strengthen Abiy's government. He is able to have some form of that would be the way to go. But this is not exactly what they are doing. They are doing the opposite. Because, I mean, if we, for example, refer to the experience, that is, this attempt, let's say, to remove a government when you don't have an reliable alternative. We are faced with this situation in Ethiopia now. So, if Abiy is removed, then what is the alternative? What would happen in Ethiopia? This is the one thing that you should consider. Now, they will not, let's say, maybe they will not go to the extent of sending, let's say, a military expedition in Ethiopia to remove Abiy. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that they want to weaken him and maybe force him to accept their condition. Or if it is not, if this is not obtainable, then what they would do is, let's say, to weaken him in such a way that there will be another emerging power in Ethiopia. That's what they mean by negotiation, actually. So
let's
okay.
Let's see the demands of the West. I mean, they seem very simple and palatable for me. For instance, they ask for a ceasefire, a national dialogue with the TPLF and other national forces. These seem very reasonable and helpful for Ethiopia's sovereignty, territorial integrity, because with the present political atmosphere in Ethiopia, with a lot of tensions everywhere, that will really threaten Ethiopia's sovereignty. So what's wrong with demanding ceasefire and political negotiation with opposition parties, including the TPLF? What's wrong with that?
So your question, if I understand it, is whether the Western proposals, let's say, can bring peace and stability in Ethiopia. That is the question.
Yes.
Now, let us be honest here. I mean, do you think that a negotiated settlement with the TPLF is still possible in Ethiopia? That is my question. What does it mean? And more importantly, the TPLF acted as a terrorist state, and now you are rewarding that behavior? Tomorrow, another secessionist party will do the same thing. I mean, you are undermining the authority of the federal government. And by doing that, I don't know how you can bring peace.
Well, they say that, look, Afghanistan, we negotiate with the Taliban and with different terrorist groups all over the world, they say. Well, save Al-Qaeda also. But so they argue, okay, TPLF is an Ethiopian organization. Well, it has been in power for a long period of time. So, well, if America negotiates with the Taliban, why not the Ethiopian government with the TPLF, they argue?
No, you don't call negotiation that. It's surrender. The Americans now have accepted their defeat. Just this so-called negotiation is just face saving. The same thing happened, let's say, elsewhere. That's what happened, let's say, in Vietnam as well. I mean, I don't see every time. It's the same thing, let's say, with Iraq. I mean, American intervention does not provide the good result that is expected. On the contrary, it creates chaos. Invariably, we saw it in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and let's say in Libya and other countries. So how can, when you have here the case of a state that is acting unlawfully, that is acting as a terrorist state, and you are asking the Ethiopian government to negotiate with those terrorists. And you think that this brings peace? And also negotiating, let's say, with the secessionist Oromo groups, do you think that also will lead to peace? Now, let us be honest.
Well, let's see the other alternative. That is war. That's conflict, chaos. So what is, I mean, if there is no...
The other alternative, precisely what is happening now, namely that we have elections, we'll have, let's say, soon a legitimate government, if everything, let's say, goes peacefully, and that this government, this new elected government, will have, let's say, enough possibility to prevail. Then they can, you see, the federal government can negotiate when it is, let's say, in a position of strength. But now, your point is that the condition as it's presented by the Western government is, the result is to weaken the government, the existing government. Because they want, let's say, to have this negotiation between, let's say, a weakened government and some very demanding secessionist or ethnic parties. And also, the fact that the Western government, or especially the American government, is siding with Sudan and Nile and Egypt, how does this bring about the resolution of the conflict over the Nile? This is one of the things precisely which are difficult to understand. The proposed solution do not bring the expected outcome. You know what happened, for example, the so-called negotiation also, when, let's say, the TPLF seized power in Ethiopia, there was supposed to be a government, let's say, of consensus. We know what happened. And also, I mean, we must face this question. Is the TPLF an organization with which you can negotiate? All the history of the TPLF since its inception shows that they never negotiate. They don't know this principle of negotiation, which is this process of give and take. They never give, they take always. See, this is a mindset of the TPLF. So, I mean, you negotiate when there is, let's say, the possibility of negotiation. They would not, you capitulate with the TPLF. You don't negotiate. And you know it. So this inclusion, this condition, let's say, of negotiation with forces, I mean, that are, let's say, against unity, against stability, that pursue secessionist agenda, all this, I mean, to include them in the negotiation, make no sense. What makes sense for me is that you help the federal government, you support the election, and then also you support the effort of this government to introduce democratic reform in Ethiopia. That's how there is a possibility of stabilizing the country.
But how do you also see the West's concerted-like campaign reporting against Ethiopia? Take very known media like the CNN and BBC, the Guardian, and other Western media. They always report some kind of, I think I can say, distorted news. Well, let me quote from the Ethiopian government official who said this. So, well, does it have something to do with the government's policy, or is it a lack of information from the Western media's part that they always report something negative on Ethiopia? Some of the facts that they claim as facts are found to be fake.
Yeah, I don't have any let's say, satisfactory explanation for this. The reaction of the media in the West was for me another surprise. I don't understand it fully, though I could see how the TPLF people maneuvered to present themselves as victims. I think this is how I see, let's say, one of the reasons why the West, let's say, adopted this position, which is that the aggressor was viewed to be the Ethiopian government. Now, is this now due to lack of information? I'm not sure. But most probably, the TPLF had, let's say, a very, very developed propaganda machine. We saw it at work. It is working perfectly. They have many people within international organization that also have some say in let's say, in shaping the policy. And also they have real people who support them within the American government. Because from what I see, Biden government is a continuation of Obama government in terms of foreign policy. And the position of Obama government was precisely to support fully the TPLF. So the same people now are pursuing the same policy. How to bring back the TPLF. So all this takes time to change the opinion of the West. But we know that time is on the side of Ethiopia. So I'm sure, let's say they will come when the truth will appear fully, and at least not for everybody, but at least for the major news organization, and let's say the narrative about the war would change. So I'm not excluding this.
Well,
go ahead.
now, well, as you said, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is defiant, and the West now, especially America, have levied sanction, a visa sanction, economic sanction on the Ethiopian government. Where do you think this situation leads into? How do we really, how is this situation going to be resolved?
It's very difficult to tell. That is, I mean, will the West pursue the sanctions, enlarge them, develop them, to include really economic sanctions, let's say, against investments so and so? I don't know. But one thing I know is that if we have a successful, relatively speaking, election and a legitimate government, and that the second phase of the Nile is accomplished, then I think things will change a little bit for the West. And also, if we pursue the task of stabilizing Tigray, and this shows some improvement there, I think also this will remove some of the major argument that the West uses to attack the Ethiopian government and justify the sanctions. So, as I say, instead of depending on the Western reaction, instead of, let's say, trying to explain further what the situation is in order to change, to, let's say, the assessment of the West, I think what we rely on ourselves and do something to change the situation on the ground.
Do you think this sanction will have some kind of impact on Ethiopia, economic impact, maybe political impact?
Of course it will have. I mean, especially if it is extended, if the sanctions are extended to other, let's say, economic interests, then of course they will have definitely an impact. But yeah, I don't know if you are ready to give the right response to this, because I mean, if we really stick to our principle of sovereignty, of national sovereignty and freedom, we should, I mean, consider the ability to develop some sort of economic system where we can rely on ourselves instead of simply relying on the West. We must know how to help ourselves. And that is a change of policy. And I don't know whether there is the will to do that in Ethiopia, but self-reliance, the policy of self-reliance, the systematic policy of self-reliance would enable us, let's say, to mitigate, let's say, the impact of these sanctions. Mm-hmm. Without, let's say, interrupting our economic progress. But I don't know, self-reliance means a complete radical change of policy. I don't know if people are ready for this in Ethiopia, or if the government is ready for this in Ethiopia. I really don't know. But that will be the thing. But otherwise, I mean, the sanction will have some impact. But they say is it worthwhile? This is the question. That is, no, because if these sanctions are, let's say, thing that we must accept in order to finish the dam, then I will say, we should, let's say, continue on this line, because this is it's a sacrifice that you get for the price, which is for our freedom to decide, and this is something, let's say, that this worth pursuing. But I don't know whether you must have a political will to do that. I don't know whether.
But do you believe that the Ethiopian government, especially the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, have engaged the West enough? Has Ethiopia made a diplomatic effort to ameliorate the situation?
I can't say it was enough. I can't say it was enough, but I don't know whether, let's say, if we try to improve this, make more effort to explain our position, I don't know if it will change the Western position. What they want from us is submission. Accept our conditions, and we'll give you whatever you want after that. If you don't do that, then here are the punishments. So this is how I see it. So unless, because you see, it's not about explaining more. For them, it's about let's say, accepting the order as defined by the Western global force.
But it reminds me of Messay Zenawi, who said once said, well, if the West asks us to do what we are not interested to do, they can go through Lima with their own aid, he said. And I think he said it at the Parliament of Ethiopia, I remember. So what is so different with Abiy Ahmed right now? I mean, Messay also was so defiant, well, as some claim. And he was more inclined to the Chinese than the Americans. So what is so new now with Abiy Ahmed? Because we have never heard Abiy Ahmed saying that our relation will be now with the Chinese or with the Russians or with other powers. It still wants to keep its relation with the Americans. And I couldn't understand why exactly it is now, why the Americans are so bitter on Abiy Ahmed than other previous regimes like Messay Zenawi's.
Yeah. I mean, you are absolutely right in mentioning these facts. I mean, he looked defiant sometimes, Messay Zenawi. But was this simply verbal, or was it really politically translated? That's the question we must ask. I mean, everybody agrees to say that Ethiopia was the darling of the West policy, the West foreign policy, and also were, let's say, very faithful in combating terrorism in Africa and elsewhere. So especially Islamic terrorism. So we're rewarded for this. Also, the issue of China, of course, is interesting because, in a sense, and this is the paradox of the whole thing. I mean, Abiy is trying to liberalize the country, whereas Messay were following the Chinese model of developmental state. They didn't seem to be preoccupied with this while Messay were there. Is it because they say that he's just playing a game? Because, I mean, there is one thing, I mean, that African countries, for example, speak of their independence. They say we cherish our independence, but it does not mean that they really fight for independence. So there is what you say, and there is also what you do. So people take seriously what you do, not what you say. You can say anything you want, but so long as your actions, let's say, ally with Western interests as they define them, then you are not a danger. On the contrary, they understand that to mean that you need some form of image, a defined image, to prevail in your country. And I think Mallas was using this to let's say to have his place, let's say, in the hierarchy, let's say, of different countries. But I think that maybe they suspect that this so-called Abiy, I mean, maybe he's very serious. Because, you know, take the case of the dam, for example. Malala started the whole thing, but he was not able to finish it. And those who followed Mallas were also unable to finish it. It was just a project, a dream, that's it there. But thanks to that, they say the whole corrupt system, let's say, was feeding, let's say, on this issue of the dam. But it seemed that even the Egyptians were not reacting. Actually, they thought that, oh, let them talk, they will never do it. That was, I think, their attitude. But when it came close, let's say, to being, let's say, finished, then everybody panicked.
Thank you. Well, I have finished my questions, but if you have something to say, some kind of advice for the West, and they
but one thing I would like to add is this. I mean, geopolitical concern. I mean, one of the reasons I think they are part of the problem, but they are not really explaining it for me. They are not enough, because the Western attitude, as we have tried, let's say, I have tried to explain, is absolutely irrational. It's reckless. It goes against their interest, their ultimate interest, because what they are proposing, really, if it is adopted, then it will wreck Ethiopia, and that the stability that they are advocating will never happen. On the contrary. So what is the deep reason? So I have to involve here not rational consideration, but let's say some emotional component, like anger, let's say, of being, let's say, rejected by this junior partner, who thinks, therefore, that he can have his way in Africa and elsewhere. It is this rebellion. They were there are certain norms of behavior that are expected from a dependent country like Ethiopia. And when they don't find that accepted, that expected behavior, then they get angry. And I call this, for me, this is an expression of racist policy. That is, it is really behind it. That is, racism for me, race or racism in general, it's not that you hate somebody. No. It's hierarchy between people. That is, you define yourself as superior, the other is inferior, and as he is inferior, then you expect obedience, submission from this person or this party or this country. They don't seem to get this. So it's not when we can't characterize as the continuation, let's say, of neo-colonial policy, but it's not that. Well, in neo-colonialism, you deplore the absence of real freedom, the real economic and political freedom, but it's not that. It is a behavior that they expect from you. For example, you must have observed in this country, it is quite frequent that so long as, for example, when you deal with racism, especially that involves the police and black people, you would see it always that so long as you say yes, so long as you obey, nothing happens. But as soon as the black person protests or say no to something, then it goes into something else, which let's say sometimes end up in shooting. And this tells me that there is some frustration on the part of the police that they were expecting some kind of behavior. This defiance for them is totally unacceptable. And it is so unacceptable that, let's say, it triggers emotional reaction. That, let's say, clouds your judgment totally. And I think this is what's happening with Western policy.
But can you corroborate that with maybe from other regions or countries? I mean, some leaders who defied the West, especially the Americans, and got some kind of punishment from them, or is it Abiy Ahmed?
Yeah. Oh, outside the case of Gaddafi, for instance. Since Gaddafi seized power, he was challenging the West. I'm not saying that he was a good leader. No, it's not what I'm saying, but I'm talking about vis-a-vis. And we could see that this Gaddafi, I mean, was really a pain for Western people, especially for Europeans. So they waited for him to make a mistake, waited for him to be in a situation where, let's say, he was be weakened, and when that happened, they intervened and got rid of him. Now, this is the thing. I mean, the whole colonial world, the whole global order is based on this. It's based on distinction. Race is not simply particular to one country. I mean, it's a global order now, where let's say those considered as inferior occupy the peripheries, and that it has a center, and it's a center that must command, and the peripheries must obey. So it's not simply in terms of real economic, let's say, term. It's also cultural. That is that is the norm of behavior that is established once and for all. That there is an order defined by global interests. You cannot challenge this order without punishment. Insubordination is totally unacceptable.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Okay. Thank you, Vasil, for inviting me.